thank you very much for being here. I hope you can hear me well. I will just give a few technical information, and we want to start on time, even though some people have not arrived yet. So this is a bilingual webinar, thanks to the interpretation provided by Coati, which is a not-for-profit solidarity collective, which operates, designs, builds, and maintains different interpreting solutions and collective tools, supporting small-scale organizations. So we thank them a lot for actually being here and making this bilingual. The Italian channel is named actually French. Don't worry, you're not going to listen to the webinar in French, but you're going to listen to it in Italian if you choose the French channel. So you just have to go to the little globe below and listen in Italian if you wish to, or switch to English if you wish to. The Geneva Academy researchers will speak in English, while the Italian stakeholders will speak in Italian. So you already have an idea of which channel to go to. You can use the chat to chat with everyone or to someone in particular for general discussions. Do not hesitate to use it. And if you have any technical problems, you use the 2 button and you send a message to me directly, and I'll try my best to actually try to resolve it. And without further ado, so I'll give the floor to Christophe, who will welcome you all and start with his presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Fulia. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you. If you all agree, it will be recorded so that we can have we can use the video recording of this session after to share it on our website and social media and network. So I will. So we have a project on the right to seats in Europe since now 4 years at the Geneva Academy, and we have focused on the implementation of the right to seats, which has been, as we will see, recognized in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants in 2018, and we have done many workshops like this in other countries in the last 3 years, and now this year we focus on the reform of the seed marketing rules at the EU level. And with this seminar today, we would like to have the perspective of Italy on this reform. And as you know, everything will be discussed in the coming months. And on the 22nd of June, we do a big event in Brussels, organized with Fulia and Arkenoa and IFOAM and Demeter and the Geneva Academy, with lots of actors, including parliamentarians and social movements. So that's the next meeting at the EU level, but we are very happy to have you all today to discuss this perspective from the point of view of Italy. So I will start with explaining a bit what the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants is and how the right to seats has been recognized in this declaration. And then after that, Fulia will make the link between this declaration and the reform that we discussed at the EU level. So that's how we have divided our presentations. So as you may know, and I have sent on the chat a link to the Declaration on the Rights of Peasants. And I have also sent you the link to the website of the Geneva Academy project on the right to seats. And so I just look at this very briefly now with sharing my screen. So on this web page that I have sent you the link, you will find the publications that we have published with Fulia in 2021. On the right to seats in Europe. So there is a manual briefing number 19 that has been published. It's a long publication, and we have made a summary of that. 10 pages publication on the right to seats in Europe that we have in English, in French, and in Spanish. And so if some of you have the energy to translate it in Italian, we can also do it and publish it in Italian if you have the energy to do it. So that could be a possibility. So what I will say now is in these publications. And then I will use also this declaration. I have also sent you the link that was adopted, as you may know, on the 17th of December 2018, okay, by the UN General Assembly. It was a 20 years process and lobby work done by La Via Campesina and allies, and 6 years of official negotiation at the UN Human Rights Council. Okay, so from 2012 to 2018, there was negotiation at the Council, and it was adopted at the end of 2018 at the Council in Geneva, and then at the UN General Assembly. What is important to know for our discussion today is that the declaration has been adopted by 151 states. No, 121 states, sorry. 8 states voted against, and 54 abstained. Okay, and in the AU, if we look at the AU states, what they have voted, 2 have voted in favor, Portugal and Luxembourg. 3 have voted against, UK, Sweden, and Hungary, and 23 AU members have abstained. Okay. What is important in this context is to say that as it is a UN General Assembly resolution and declaration, there is in the UN Charter, there is a commitment to implement General Assembly resolutions. And so there is a good faith obligation, let's say, to implement the declaration. What is also important is that this declaration is based on international treaties that have all been ratified by the AU. Okay. So, for example, they have all accepted the right to food in the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights of '66, but also many other rights that are in the declaration, they have been accepted by states. Okay, so the right to food, for example, it's compulsory for the AU member states, and if we talk about the right to food of peasants, of course, it must include the right to seeds, it must include the right to land. When we discuss what the right to food means. Okay, so we can use the declaration to interpret binding international law for AU member states. Okay, so that's very important, and we don't have the time to go into lots of details, but many courts since 3 years now or 4 years have been using the declaration to interpret binding international law. Okay, so we have, for example, a court in Ecuador 6 months ago, who canceled what was called in Honduras and Ecuador. In Honduras, the law was called the Monsanto law. It was a law on intellectual property rights over seeds, and the Supreme Court of Honduras canceled the law to protect the right to seeds, and the Supreme Court used the Declaration on the Rights of Peasants to say that peasants have the right to seeds and the right to food, and that these rights cannot be violated by this law, and so the law was cancelled. Okay, so that's a very important precedent that we have now in Honduras, also the same kind of decision in Ecuador, and so it shows how the right to food and the right of peasants and the right to seeds of peasants can be used to protect peasants' seeds and peasant seed systems. Okay, so now I quickly go through the declaration. So the first article presents what is a peasant. It's any person who engages or who seeks to engage, okay, alone or in association with others or as a community in small-scale agricultural production for subsistence and or for the market, and who relies significantly through not necessarily exclusively on family or household labor and other non-monetized ways of organizing labor, and who has a special dependency on an attachment to the land. Okay, so that's the definition that we have. Then it says that in the activities in which they could be involved, peasants, artisanal small-scale agriculture, crop planting, livestock raising, pastoralism, fishing, forestry, hunting, or gathering, okay, or handicraft related to agriculture. It says that it also applies to indigenous peoples, local communities working the land, and to hired workers. Okay, so the declaration also applies to the workers in agriculture. Then with Article 2, we have the state's obligations. So it's all the state's obligations are in this Article 2, and then each time we have we will see after, each time we have a right, we also have the state's obligation in the specifically in correlation to the specific rights of the declaration. So we start with these obligations to respect, protect, and fulfill that we know international human law. So respect, the state should not do something wrong or negative that impacts the rights, for example, to seats. Protect is that the state should protect against the activities of third parties, including companies, and fulfill is all the positive measures that the state should take to for example, to support a peasant seat system. Then another important obligation, the state should elaborate, interpret, and apply relevant international agreements and standards to which they are party in a manner consistent with their human rights obligations as applicable to peasants. So that means, and it's in accordance with the international law and the United Nations Charter, for example, that the state should interpret, apply, and elaborate other international agreements, including those on intellectual property rights, in accordance with the rights of peasants. Okay, so that's extremely important. It says that the human rights should have the priority over, for example, intellectual property rights. And then 2.5 is the fact that the state should take necessary measures to ensure that non-state actors, so such as companies, that they are in position to regulate, respect, and strengthen the rights of peasants. Okay, so that's also very important. Then we have another important article is Article 10 on participation. So peasants and other people working in rural areas have the right to active and free participation directly and or through their representative organizations in the preparation and implementation of policies, programs, and projects that may affect their lives, land, and livelihood. So that's very important, for example, in the context of the EU, the negotiation of the new rules. Okay, so the peasant organization should be participating, but also, of course, in Italy, and for example, in the reform that you had in the law that affected the right to seats, or future laws that will affect the right to seats. And then Article 19 is the right to seats. So it starts with 4 components of the right to seats that are very close to the recognition of the right to seats or farmers' rights in Article 9 of the International Plant Treaty, accepted, ratified at FAO in 2001. So it's the right to the protection of traditional knowledge relevant to plant genetic resources, the right to equitably participate in sharing the benefits arising from the utilization of plant genetic resources, the right to participate in the making of decisions on matters relating to the conservation and sustainable use of plant genetic resources, and the right to save, use, exchange, and sell farm saved seeds or propagating material. Okay, so that's these components are, as I said, already in the plant treaty. But what is important here is that it's not in accordance with national law, what we can find in the plant treaty. Here, it doesn't say that, because the logic of the declaration, the logic of human rights, as we have said, is that it should take priority over international law, but also over national law. Then peasants, they have the right to maintain, control, protect, and develop their own seeds and traditional knowledge. There is again this requirement for states to respect, protect, fulfill the right to seeds. States should ensure that seeds of sufficient quality and quantity are available to peasants at the most suitable time for planting and at an affordable price. Okay. States should recognize the rights of peasants to rely either on their own seeds or on other locally available seeds of their choice, and to decide on the crops and species they wish to grow. A very important one also is 19.6. States should take appropriate measures to support peasant seed systems and to promote the use of peasant seed and agro biodiversity. Okay, we all know that in the last 40 years, states have supported commercial seed systems and not peasant seed systems. So that's a commitment if you want to do differently than what has been done in the last 40 years. Then the 7 is about agricultural research that should integrate the need of pheasants, including in the priorities for development, for research and development, taking into account their experience and increased investment in research and development of orphan crops and seeds that respond to the needs of peasants. Okay, that's also important in the context of the EU and Italy. And the last one, states should ensure that seed policies, plant variety protection, and other intellectual property rules, certification schemes, and seed marketing laws respect and take into account the rights, needs, and realities of peasants. Okay, so that's very explicit and very useful for what we are doing with the discussing the EU reform on the seed marketing rules. So it says explicitly that this reform should respect and take into account the right to seeds of peasants and their needs and realities. Okay, so that's what we have for this on the basis of this declaration. And as you have seen, there is lots of potential for how to use it in the context of the reform in the EU and also in the discussion in Italy. And so now I will let Fulya make the link with between the declaration and the reform at the EU level. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Christophe. And I will now, as he said, so look at what the UNDROP means in the future EU seed marketing reform. But before we do that, I wanted to flag that the United Nations Declaration, the holistic rights that are that have been recognized for peasants and people living in rural areas are affected by numerous laws, whether at European level or national level, which we will look at afterwards in the case of Italy. But a bulk of those rights relate to ownership. So what I like to call ownership, it's actually so who controls the seeds. These are so intellectual property rights, which grants artificial monopolies for inventions, which can be so plant varieties or genetic information, or also processes sometimes. And then you have the traditional knowledge, access, and benefit sharing, which have been recognized as, in reaction to these monopoly rights that were given by intellectual property. You also have a bulk of laws which relate to risk. As you could say it's a risk. So it's those that relate to plant and seed health. So the prevention of risks of pests, diseases, and also everything that relates to food safety. So if you modify the genome, it creates a risk which needs to be assessed before the seeds and plants and products which contain this modification or have been developed with different techniques are put on the market or cultivated. And then the third part, which is the subject of today, is seed marketing rules. And these only concern the condition for the sale of seeds. So it's only about the access to market. Seed marketing rules, they may have an indirect impact and are linked to ownership and everything that relates to risk, but they are standalone. Like the main goal is only to say which seeds actually make it to the market. That's all they do in theory. And so how is our UNDROP rights affected by EU seed marketing rules? So you have direct effects of these rules on the right to save, use, exchange, and sell their own seeds. So for peasants, the right to maintain, control, and develop their own seeds, and the right to have access to locally adapted seeds. But indirectly, it also definitely impacts the right to participate in decision-making, in the shape of in the decision of the law, the policy making itself, but also the follow-up technical processes that come once the law is established. And the right to the protection of traditional knowledge and the sharing of benefits. So because the conditions of access to the market could indirectly recognize that, there is something called peasant and farmer innovation, which is not always the case now. So what are EU seed marketing rules today? I'm going to quickly go through it. It's a very complex body of law. You have 12 European directives, directives being non-directly applicable, so they need to be transposed in each country. So you actually have 27 different national seed marketing regimes. And the main principles of these laws and these regimes is that before you market seeds, you need to register either the plant variety or you yourself as an operator, the plant variety or the operator, before you sell any seeds. There are strict rules on quality, the production of seeds. So you've heard of the seed certified seeds, so seed lot certification schemes, and then labeling rules and control mechanisms. And in the EU, these rules came in the 1960s, although they come from the 1930s at national level with the political regimes that were in place in the 1930s. But in the 60s, all of these rules were taken up at EU, and the idea was really to have productivity objectives for industrial agriculture within the context, so post-war, so very a deficit in production. And so the idea is to guarantee the identity and quality of seeds and reach productivity. And that's why peasant seed systems and the rights that have been recognized under UNDROP only find themselves in the EU seed marketing rules as derogations. They're not a principle. The principle is what is called distinctiveness, uniformity, and stability to be able to register a seed. And so it is all looking for productivity in industrial agriculture. The first question that needs to be asked, that's very important for the implementation of UNDROP in EU seed marketing rules, is whether exchange and sale of seeds between peasants and of peasant seeds is marketing. And you have extremely different approaches in the EU. For instance, in Denmark, which is one of the most liberal examples we have, is non-commercial use is not marketing. And also, so farmers and peasants are to a certain extent in this exemption, so accepted in it. Whereas in Estonia, every single exchange of seed is viewed as marketing. Okay, so even between gardeners, so also definitely between peasants. And so this means that they have to register all of the varieties to be able to exchange, not just sell seeds. And then the second big question that relates to EU seed marketing rules is whether marketing of locally adapted varieties for low input conditions allowed, so for peasant agriculture. So you have a derogation regime, which is the conservation regime, and then the amateur variety regime for vegetables, which allow for this kind of seed to make it to the market, but with very strict conditions. And we will hear from the Italian stakeholders also what it means in practice, if it really works. So as a conclusion, we can say that there's very little margin of action for peasant seed systems today, and there's no recognition of farmers' knowledge, and most marketed varieties do not correspond to their needs. And the principle of exchange that all the peasant seed systems are based on is not recognized as a right. So now we are in the middle of a reform. It started in November 2019, the request from the European member states, and then a consultancy did a study, which essentially was taken up by the Commission to say that we need to change this legislation. It is unfit for the European Green Deal with facilitated registration, but also adaptation to technological developments and innovation, read new genetic modified organism, and digital innovation. In June 2021, you had an inception impact assessment with some very vague options for reform. And now we're in the middle of the impact assessment. So the same consultancy is now doing a background study on which the Commission will base its proposal. They're going to start writing their proposal, I think, after the summer. So now I think the consultancy will launch a validation survey in the weeks to come of their results, and those results will now be used by the Commission to write either a directive or a regulation. And then in 2023, the proposal will go to the member states and the parliament, which are the co-legislators at EU level. So what does it mean? You know, it's a mixed bag. So we have 4 very vague options. And even with all of the consultation activities that have taken place, so there was a huge public consultation, there were targeted surveys, there were interviews, it's still not clear what the options are, which is usually the case in, unfortunately, most policy initiatives. But it's a mixed bag. So you have interesting elements, especially in option 2, where there's this idea that there would be an ad hoc regime for the exchange only of seeds between farmers. So it's the beginning of something, but we don't know how far that idea will be taken up. But you also have very worrying elements. So on the privatization of controls, this notion of sustainability and digitalization, that maybe something also when viewed with the plant health regulation about mandatory registration for all operators, and then you can do what you want. So it's a mixed bag. And the question that we want to ask today is what beneficial, what is worrying, what is missing, but in the Italian context, and seeing also everything that happened in Italy, because you went to a reform process of the national law, I think. And so without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Antonio.
We thank you so much. I will continue in Italian.
Grazie.
I will go to my screen. Oops. Sì, quindi salve.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I would like to thank the Academy for organizing this tour in Italy as well, in order to get into details of the application of such an important tool, such UNDROP, and to compare different realities of the Italian agriculture. We will try to be brief. First, we'd like to understand what kind of norms do we have in place in EU. As Furia was saying before, we already know what we're talking about, but this new negotiation that will be able to grant us one norm, and this thanks to some proposals of the ministries. This is thanks to Aeroseed, that says that the seeds that were made by the peasants are illegal. And this session sometimes is not, we cannot relate to it in real life, because I would just like, I don't want to talk about what you already know, but we know that the diversification of the crops is thanks to an adaptation made by men and women. This is when plants were not cultivated yet. And so this is the result that we're seeing.
Besides
the change of the economic system and the change in the society, we have a system, a so-called peasant seed system, that we kept despite the development in the Western world and repression. The key element of this peasant seed system is the ability to evolve in these fields. Biodiversity. It is a very important thing, because the industrial varieties that are those that are put on the market throughout the system, the marketing system, industrial marketing system, actually they, before going to labs, they derive from what has been picked up by the different peasants, especially in the Mediterranean area. As you might know, this is one of the most important centers of biodiversity, of food biodiversity. In order to understand
per convincere un po' tutti che non stiamo
what we're
presentando
talking about, in order to convince everyone that we're not just making a small indication because we love nature or because we want to safeguard rural areas. We have a lot of documents about peasants' seed systems. This is just one of the few slides that I have that has been originated by Oxford. And they, as you can see here, this is what part of the used seeds are seeds that don't go through the marketed certified system. Another very important element in order to understand the peasant seed system
culturale o morale, se volete, in verità il sistema sementero contadino non funziona attraverso
it doesn't work through the privatization of a single farmer. Actually, it's the opposite. It works throughout the practice and to the safeguard of collective rights of the peasants. So this collective system, peasant system, is based on two pillars. The first one is a cultural one. Peasants don't think themselves as the owners of their own plants, besides the plants that they sell, but those are just the products that derive from the plants they cultivate. Also, the second pillar is their indication to protect their seed system is radicated in the collective rights, because the peasant seed system couldn't exist based on private factors. So we're not talking about an individual right to access seeds, but it's a collective right to keep and maintain the economy of a self-regulated system. And this is what happens in Italy. Italy, among different European countries, is one of those countries that has the highest number of small, medium enterprises. If we compare it with France, for example, what happens in Italy, what happens in France is that generally what is a big company in France for us, it's a medium company. It's equivalent, it's a medium company in Italy. So if we talk about a small company, it is very important in the agricultural system, the Italian agricultural system. We always look at a GDP that is less than 15,000 euros a year, and in the Italian agriculture system, all the people that work in this field, there are more or less 3.5 million people, and a third of them is 1 million of people. So as you can understand, this is what represents the small enterprises of peasants. And on the other side, if we would like to compare it with the big companies out there, we can say that the companies that have more than 10 workers, the ULA, is only the 2.7% people. They produce around 5.4% of the production, of the total agricultural production. And if you want to have an average number, the companies that have less than 1 ULA, they produce 25.5%, this year 26% of the agricultural production. In Italy, it's between 50 and 60 billion euros. We're not talking about small numbers here. In Italy, the agricultural situation also is based on a conflictual situation in terms of occupation, in terms of employment rate, because and also the way the products are put on the market. And this is a very important thing we should focus on. So the production of seeds, it's a tradition, but it's also a need from a financial point of view for the adaptation of commercial varieties and the conditions of local cultivation and to climate change. So
dinamica della biodiversità. Queste due cose vanno
these
strettamente.
two things,
E quindi
they are very important.
molto chiaro che lo sforzo che dobbiamo dare è uno sforzo gigantesco, perché dobbiamo difenderci a livello legislativo, in una legislazione sementiera, per difendere il nostro reddito, ma anche un modo alternativo di concepire, conservare, proteggere, ampliare l'agrobiodiversità coltivata. E qui poi cominciano però i drammi, Furia già ha citato, no? Perché dobbiamo confrontare non soltanto elementi di diritto, ma dobbiamo confrontarci anche con elementi cosiddetti scientifici. I prodotti delle nuove tecnologie genetiche che cercano di sfuggire alla regolamentazione OGM possono essere e sono in verità una delle minacce più gravi, perché la contaminazione che porterebbero nei sistemi sementieri contadini rischiano queste contaminazioni di rendere via via inefficace il lavoro di selezione e adattamento che i contadini fanno, anche perché, come sapete, i prodotti dell'ingegneria genetica vanno sempre accompagnati con diritti di brevetto. Qual è l'elemento culturale che ci contraddistingue?
Antonio, just sorry, because we have lost, I think, English interpretation.
Oh.
Is that possible? Because, yeah, Elena, are you still, or who, Marcella?
I'm here.
Okay, because we can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Can
in the English channel.
Yes. Okay,
yes.
that's perfect.
Thank you. Grazie. Sorry.
Okay. Sì, no, mi avvio.
So as I'll try to be as brief as possible. So as I was saying, we're trying to defend an idea of a peasant economy. There are some logic, some rights, and some bases that are an alternative to the industrial model and the norm, the system of norms that is producing, also supporting this economy. This will be a very complex change in order to defend, all right, because we need, from one side, defend our ability to exchange, but also sell materials that is the result of an adaptation and a selection of peasants. But also, on the other side, we need to protect ourselves from the seeds produced in the factories,
siamo messi
in industrialized factories. But I think we are more facilitated to guarantee an ecological transition. And the EU has been talking about this a lot, but they also have a lot of contradictions with their actions. But then, let's look at the Italian law. We have a civil code where any good that is exchanged is to the, it's a contract of a transferring of a property of one thing and the transferring of the rights of something I mean, thanks to exchange with money. I mean, so what I'm trying to say is that this interpretation, we use this interpretation many times. In Italy, no one ever got to court for using seeds produced by the industry.
In altri paesi.
But this happened in other countries. And after this contractual setting, national companies have started to write on their labels and also in a very, very small font, so nobody could actually read it, that the rights to this product, I mean, they wrote they have written in a very small font this, that in case we use these seeds, we could go to court. So what Christophe was saying also
Alla fine dell'anno,
before, he knows how it works, but at the end of 2022, the Italian Parliament has launched a decree that was completely reforming the national seat system without waiting for the European seat system. Because in Italy, they're trying to push the European law, which sometimes is seen as limiting our work on the national level. So it's so hard to introduce the GMO, and we try to. Actually, this decree never. There is in this decree. We also thought, in order to get some new items in the Article 1, where we see the application field and the aim, the law and the decree in the comma 4, the agriculturists can use the seeds or part of the seeds in their crop. So we know that there is a change in between the exchange of the crop and the exchange of the material, thanks to the multiplication of the material. So in the paragraph number 6, we have obtained a description, a clear description, that if the marketing activity from a farmer to another farmer, as the Italian law says, if this is an activity that we can consider as marketing, but in the paragraph number 6, you see they are not marketing. All those activities that include the commercial exploitment of varieties. For example, the use of the seeds made by agriculturists, it's to say the exchange of part of the crop made by the main farmer. So in Italy, a farmer can sell to another farmer a part of its crop as a material to for production. So I believe this is a good outcome, a good implementation of articles related to the right to seeds. Unfortunately, we didn't achieve all we wanted. The reproduction of made through the purification of the seeds, let's say by cleaning the seeds made in the companies. This is considered a crime. Here we didn't manage to be granted with this one. We will work again. We are not talking about farmer seeds here, but this is another kind of seeds. But anyways, in order to finish with my presentation, the Italian seed system is worth 700 million a year. The Società Italiana Sementi belongs for the 51% to Coldiretti, for the 49% to a group of investors, among which one of the biggest technological enterprise. It has an annual revenue of 700 million euros. Now we also have Bayer and other companies and a lot of smaller enterprises that are the 53% of the total of the enterprises. Only 1.5% are big enterprises. And it's very interesting to see what happens with fruit companies where we only have micro enterprises. So if we protect these companies by GMO and GT products with an adequate seed law, we could keep the diversification of the seed offer. This is something that we consider a positive thing. And even the peasants,
sul mercato nazionale. Ultimo elemento, evidentemente tra le minacce abbiamo la digitalizzazione, delle risorse genetiche.
Genetic resources. Italy also has this situation. Since 2016, one of the national bodies is working on the genetic resources. And these are public banks of data that are...
Con un piccolo appello, se me lo consentite, c'è in corso, ma poi ne parleremo ancora, forse nelle domande, in corso una campagna a difesa delle sementi transgeniche e in questo segnalo una notizia dell'altro giorno, 18 di maggio, quindi 2 settimane fa, che
So 2 weeks ago, Sementi, which is the national company for industrial seeds, says that half of the wheat, of the durum wheat, is not certified. So these are good news. While bad news should be stopped, then this is a petition that is ongoing. So the rules that can be applied to the products of new genetic technologies will be the same. They are not modified in the European Union, or also in Italy. In Italy, in order to keep our status of a...
Quindi chi volesse, gli chiediamo di firmare, troverà la petizione sul nostro web, ma su altri web di una trentina di organizzazioni italiane che solo in Italia partecipano a questa campagna. Ce ne sono poi molte altre che partecipano a livello europeo. Grazie.
Yeah.
Perché Floria, tu l'avevi nominato la sezione 2A, dove c'è questo elemento di positività in cui l'Unione Europea dice di stabilire un quadro ad hoc, forse legale. Ci auguriamo che questo sia possibile. Grazie.
Thank you so much, Antonio. Now we will give the floor to Riccardo Bocci from Rete Semirurale. And please, if you have questions, you can use the Q&A below in the bottom layer, and we will try to address them. But for that, everyone needs to keep to their time. So we have time for question and answers. Thank you, Riccardo.
Thank you, Fulia. I also will profit of the translation. I will go in Italian. So, grazie, sono Riccardo Bocci.
Thank you. My name is Riccardo Bocci. I am the director of Rete Semirurale, that is the Network for Rural Seeds. My presentation, together with the one of Matteo, is titled "To Enlarge the Range of Seeds Adapted to Farmers' Agriculture." I will talk about our network, a little bit about our seeds we're working on, the range of seeds we have, about participatory selection, and then some good ideas for future discussion. This is a network of 32 organizations that was created in 2007. We are structured in 4 areas for working as a research and action, then to solve change, community, and the what we call the House of Seeds. In English, it's called known as community seed banks. So we were created in 2007. At that time, we were focusing on conservation, whereas today we have introduced research of participatory genetic improvement and participation. Today is no longer only about conservation, but it's about the dynamic management of biodiversity. It's a very complex and concept. Last year, we started a library at our place, it's a public library. It is open twice a week. There are books and there are documents about agrobiodiversity. So this adds up to our own seed library. Then we're also working on urban gardens. So that these are like urban common vegetable gardens on Florence and around Florence, working on biodiversity. before talking about seeds, I wanted to share with you our approach. What does collective management of biodiversity mean? Well, we are approach this not only as genetic material, but as a tool to diversify our agricultural systems, to diversify our food systems and our diet eventually. So we're actually talking about public health and nutrition, not only about seeds, because seeds affect much more around this topic. It involves the society as a whole and not just farmers. This is recognized by scientific publications like the one I am showing here, the importance of putting together biodiversity, of health and food. Then let's talk about seeds, how we are enlarging the range. First of all, for some thoughts following what Antonio said. When we talk about seeds, we talk about three different things. We talk about the genetic resources that follow some international treaties, for example, the one in Nagoya to access to resources and intellectual property. And then we have the seed. So all the law related to the seed and to the health of the plant. And then we have the products. So then the market and the labeling and the traceability. What about exchange of seeds? So it's important to think about many different legislations and not only the one specific on seeds. We need to work on a wide range of legislation. Historically in Europe, farmers have access to varieties that are modern, protected. Over time, in the last 15 years, there is also the conservation varieties that have been added, thanks also to our work at a national European level, and then also all the organic products. In Italy, we have something specific at a national level that is another catalog that is a national register. On this national register, there's going to be all the local varieties that are not on the official catalog. I hope that's clear. On this national register, we should favor exchange and of resources and access to resources. I'm sure that you know this part, so I'm not going to talk about this slide because you know what happens in Europe since 2008. So what about the conservation strategies in Italy? Well, in Italy, if we make an assessment of the last 15 years, in Italy, we have a lot of registered varieties. These are the data of about a few years ago. So we have 42 vegetable crops, 16 vegetable crops without intrinsic value, 80 farming species. We have a control surface very small. So it means that most of the people who are registered do not ask certification of the seed. And the certified surface is half of the control surface, which means that half of the fields are not certified. Today, these tool of certified conservation varieties has not been used to increase seed marketing of these varieties, but more as a tool to create markets and products from these varieties. If you want to know more about this, you can check our website. Unfortunately, this is all in Italian, but we have lots of material, number 21 and number 22. This is about national legislation. Let's talk now about participatory selection and research. Since 2010, we started at a European level some research that has allowed us to work on blends, on crossbreeding, on heterogeneous material, and on work on this participatory and decentralized research. So very different actors in each context in which the actors are actually working and using these products. These are the main bodies that you can see: Solibam, then Diversi Food, and Live Seeds. And you can see also the time frames below for each organization. These projects have allowed us to understand that when diversity of varieties increases, in the innovation process becomes more and more important the interaction between the researcher and the agriculture and the farmer. So we can imagine that in production of hybrid varieties, for instance, researchers and farmers are two different individuals, and they're just have commercial relationships. But in case of heterogeneous material or composite crossed by population, it is very important that the farmer and the breeder are, the researcher and the farmer have a very close relationship, because a farmer is not a user, but is somebody who collaborates and contributes to research. So we have added this data in our research, and we promote all these training programs for all actors. The outcomes of our research have allowed us not only to lead scientific projects and activities, but also to bring something to companies. We work with many companies as well, and also with Italian farmers individually. One of the most practical consequences and outcomes is that we've been able to label some seeds. So you can see here a yellow label. This is the very first label at the national level, and maybe the third one at a European level, that was certified, something that was not registered at the national level. So the ministry representatives came, they did checked specifically this variety. That was great. That was very important, because it made us understand how to manage the process and how to put on the market some seed and some varieties that can meet the different needs of the farmers. All this became the label that you can see here below. This label was developed through a regional project. We put the name of the population, the name of the farmer, so that's the location as well of where the variety is developed. Then the story of the research process. And then a couple of things about the property rights. So as you can read, the rules like these are not protected by intellectual rights, and it's an open source pledge. And then also what we talk about farmers' rights. So when you open the bag of seeds, you can replant, you can resow the seed, you can reuse, and you also have all the information on the label. I just want to go back a second. You also have a list of rights that you can read on the label. And if you may do some research on these seeds, you need to share the results of your research with other people. You can see this product, you can see a different label here for to citizens, because we think that it's important that citizens are aware of what's going on behind the doors, because we can have the support of citizens, and if their support is very important. So to raise awareness among citizens, it's important also to support our research, because we are not funded by public research funds. So having the support of citizens is also very important, support of consumers. I'm going to finish my presentation with some other details. We are working on a database. Our database is Diversitas, and will allow us to connect all the different categories and areas of our work. And then I have some ideas for the future. If the European Union said that for the strategy Farm to Fork, then strategy for biodiversity, that we must target 25% of organic agriculture, this we can only do if we really can approach organic seeds. So we need to work on seeds if we want to reach this target. In order to do this, we need to imagine new seed systems. So decentralized, farmer-oriented systems with a new role for farmers, and of course of citizens and of consumers and researchers and technicians in the breeding, research and innovation aspect, so that everybody can take place in this process. This also answers to one of the obligation, Article 6 of the Treaty on the Protection of New Varieties of Plants. And this is particularly important now that we are going through this process, this reform process. we can imagine many different rules and not just one specific label for conventional varieties, but a lot of different specific things and laws for different types of varieties, like conservation varieties, specification varieties. So we need to imagine like a system of a lot of laws that include market, include research, include, even if there are intellectual property rights to protect, then we also need to address them, but specifically not for all. We have this link with other partners of this same system, also as I said, citizen, to understand who can fund this process of innovation, informal innovation. And this is why we are looking for answers regarding the public commitment or simply citizen involvement. So these are just some ideas. We are working on these points that you can read here on my slide. There are 4 topics, and I really hope that they will be taken into account by Italian legislation. So the recognition of the role of farmers in breeding and maintaining diversity, reviewing the concept of derived varieties within the framework of the UPOV, and strengthening farmers' privilege and breeders' exemptions on plant variety rights legislation. And then as far as public policies are concerned, going from conservation to management of biodiversity in the agricultural context.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. And now we're going to have a second presentation from the Rete Semirurali network with Matteo. Yeah.
Thank you, Fulia. I'm Matteo Petitti from Rete Semirurali. I will also present in Italian. And so connecting to what Ricardo already said, I will give you some updates on what's the situation in Italy with regards to innovations brought in by the new organic regulations, for especially as regards seed diversity. And we cannot do that without talking about the main, scusate, passo di nuovo all'italiano.
I'm sorry, I'll go back to Italian, as I was saying. So just I'm trying to talk about my presentation while giving you some of the practical experiences that we can see in Italy linked to the biodiversity of seeds and to the organic seeds that we have in our crop. So this is thanks to the 848 regulation from January of this year in terms of organic seeds. I would like to start by saying that this is a very important news, but it's not maybe too new, because since 1930s, you know that if we introduce new, very diversified population, could lead to agri-food outcomes in terms of plants as well. As we can see, some of the mixtures of wheat, of beer, thanks to Martin Wolf, who is a phytopathologist from the UK. We adopted those seeds in the German Republic, and in a very, very few years, they reached the total, they actually put seeds of wheat in the whole soil. Then after unification of Germany, we went back to single varieties, and they changed the way they put the seeds on the soil. But I would like to show you that on the lightseed.eu website, you can see different booklets that have been translated into different European languages, and they are about these organic seed management. So if you want, you can go on this website. If we look at the organic regulation, we can look at the cereal population. This study has started in 2014 and it had lasted 7 years. Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Great Britain, they all participated. And they, this study was about all different cereals. Then in 2018, there was a new regulation, organic regulation, for the category heterogeneous organic material, where they extended this to different species, to all the species, to produce and put on the market different species. Then also Hungary in 2019 was added in this study. And then after that, thanks to the outcomes of the European projects that we just quoted, the European Commission has published different decrees that go into detail on how we should produce and certify these organic these organic seeds. This is thanks to the dialogues that took place between different European associations that were involved in this in the field of promoting and protecting biodiversity. Also, something that includes Italy and other countries as well. It's a temporary experiment. This experiment was to February of 2021. It was starting in January 2022. This new study, but the Ministry of Agriculture expanded the possibility to sell the population of seeds that were already produced until the new organic norm was taking place. Unfortunately, this wasn't applicable, and many of the seeds that were already produced couldn't be sold on the market. So on January, there is this new norm, this new rules, with a very simple procedure, with a communication to the authorities that are committed in the organic field. They're working in the organic field for the protection of the products produced. And this doesn't require any registration, but it just underlines aspects such as the quality of seeds, and so some requirements, phytosanitary requirements, have to be respected, and also the traceability of the material, which is mandatory for the people who actually put these seeds on the market. Now, if we look at what is this organic heterogeneous material, the definition can be found in the regulation text of the European Union, where a population characterized by a high level of phenotypical and genetical variety is not a variety, but it's a mix of varieties. But then in the delegated regulation, they go into details to this temporary experiment. So we have two different chances. The first option is a cross-breed population. It's a classic population. Then we also added two different possibilities that lead to different perspectives. We can obtain organic heterogeneous material with practices made in companies through the selection or the creation of different biodiverse material in order to treat different populations obtained by the agriculturists by reproducing the seeds again, or just working with local varieties or some mixtures. Also, it also gives the chance to use other techniques used for the production of genetic and material. So according to our interpretation, in this category, we don't only have crossbreed mixtures, like in the temporary experiment and in the according to the scientific literature, but also with dynamic mixtures. That's to say that local mixtures that are evolved in the environment where they are produced. So some proportions are altered, and there are some spontaneous crossbreeds. We also have a very high level of diversity, which doesn't satisfy the requirements for conservation. So these are all very interesting aspects for the biological, for the organic field to develop and put on the market different seeds that are diversified and to meet the need of the lack of this organic material need. So this is just to give you some examples. In Italy, there were 8 soft wheat, 1 of durum wheat, and 1 of wheat. As you can see, these are very big quantities in Italy at the European level. I think it's one of the countries that has participated in the most active way. Many organic agricultures were interested into this project. One of the population is the soft wheat called Fura, which is available since 2017 as a certified seed by 2 different agricultures that have cultivated and have grown these seeds since 2010, and it is available on this journal. You can see the study is available, and it shows some agronomics aspects. And then also, this is another species. This could be an organic heterogeneous material. This is a tomato plant. This has been selected during light seed project. Another population of tomato developed in the light seed during the light seed project, for according to the characteristic of resistance to the disease. Also another zucchini population. So beans population. So some corn for human consumption, chickpeas. Also in here we see this has been in partnership with the Bergamo company, also with the participation of other companies, some oats population. This is also an ongoing experiment.
Lenticchie e popolazioni di riso.
Matteo, I'm sorry, could you wrap up? Is it possible?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm nearly finished, and poi abbiamo una popolazione di lupino bianco.
And now we have sunflower population, a lupin population. Some of these populations already reached consumers, and the first for the first organic heterogeneous material, we see Crescent 180. This was developed by a group of Veneto peasants, and was notified to the ministry the April of this year. This is one of the first in Italy, maybe in whole Europe. And I would like to conclude. I talk about the heterogeneous material because it's already existent, but we already have a new experiment that is ongoing, and it will be very interesting how all these categories will be managed in the bank data, and we will see how they behave in different countries thanks to the abolition of the delegations within the year 2035. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matteo. And now we have our last panelist. We finish with a female voice of Alessandra Turco. Thank you so much for being here. I guess you can speak Italian. Thank you.
Perfetto, grazie Giulia, buongiorno a tutti e a tutte. Grazie per...
Thank you for organizing this meeting and thank you for taking part in it. My name is Alessandra Turco. I'm a farmer. I live very close to Torino on the hills. I have a small farm, very diversified. We do small productions from seed to the product marketing. I'm part of the many different organizations in Italy, also the La Via Campesina in Europe. So I belong to a network of 21 different organizations. Sorry, 21 countries and more than 30 farmers organizations and peasants. There is trade unions, there is civil society organizations and so on. I work with agroecological organic farming, not only organic, and it's also my life, my lifestyle, but it's also an approach to life and to relationships. In general, in agroecological farmers, agriculture, there's a lot of focus on resource management. We talk about conservation, so meaning that we consider resources from the peasants' traditions and we try to manage them in the best possible ways in order to transmit these techniques, for example, water management or seed conservation or management in general. So a balance and holistic management of all that surrounds us. And then it's a very dynamic management of biodiversity, both cultivated and natural biodiversity. So our approach is very holistic. A farmer's main goal to manage his environment is to make food. So when we talk about peasants agriculture from an agricultural agrobiological point of view, we need to consider many different aspects. We're talking about a type of agriculture that both in periods of crisis or in ordinary times, let's say, it is very adaptable. That's the main aspect. It is adapted not only as a type of agriculture, but also the person of the farmer who needs to adapt to every possibility and opportunities that comes, and also adapt to resources that are available and that he needs to manage. We're talking about seeds today. We talked about a management that needs to take into account the fact that the surroundings are constantly evolving and seeds therefore need to be adapted and adaptable and cannot answer to the requirements of stability that we mentioned just before. Within the different treaties at the international level, beyond the UNDROP declaration, we refer a lot to the Treaty of Genetic Resources, as well as the Declaration of the Indigenous Populations of the United Nations. Because in all these treaties, like Antonio highlighted, a key factor of all these treaties is that the right is a collective right. And this is crucial. It's a pillar of these treaties. So we, as farmers, are recognized within farmers' rights. So it is, it is our right to save and to plant seeds, but also we are identified as active actors to dynamically manage biodiversity. Trying to be short because we're very late today, and I don't want to repeat other people's things that have been said by other people. So let's talk about a European level. There are different processes that are underway. The most recent consultations that we have taken part in as actors in the management of seeds, because we're farmers. So I'm talking about consultancies, about new genetic techniques, as well as on the division on the regulation on trade and on marketing. So what we think about these processes that are underway, we think that is necessary to have a legal framework that is united and that can allow farmers, both men and women, to work freely and to have full access to their collective rights. In order to do so, it is important to implement all the rights that were written on these international treaties, but this is not enough. The national level legislation needs to meet the needs of farmers. The different contexts, unfortunately, are not taken into account. And as we have seen, for instance, the movement of seeds, of industrial seeds, has been encouraged and has neglected the circulation and the movement, and therefore the availability of farmer seeds, peasants and traditional seeds. However, farmer seeds are much more adapted and adaptable to peasant and an organic type of farming. At the same time, we are facing a type of European agricultural policy. So I'm talking about the European Green Deal, this new green European policies that are supposed to encourage more sustainability, are supposed to encourage green transition. But actually, in the proposals, we actually see that individual practices, individual techniques are considered, and we do not consider all the different practices and different resources and skills that should be taken into account and should be used. So sustainability is not possible, as anybody who works in rural areas and agriculture knows. What we do think is that it is important to recognize from a legal point of view a legal framework that recognizes two different seed types, different seed systems, the commercial one and the peasants one. We also think that we need to diversify the commercial offer because it needs to be able to adapt to, for example, environmental changes, and therefore answering to the needs of our era. Then let's talk about commercial seed system. We need to highlight that the selection and the production of seed is done in a lab or is done in experimental plots. In this way, farmers, who is actually the user of the seed, ends up with a product that it was produced in an anonymous system, and it's called a seed, and he needs to adapt to it. And he needs to use it as it is, following the guidelines that are provided. But actually, in the peasant system, the farmer is at the center of the system. So we changed perspective completely. And the production system of the seeds is within the production. Within there is a selection that is made. And there is a passage, there is a transition of the seed to the consumer. So which means to another farmer or other people who are collective or producers, or anyway, people who are directly involved in the process. So there is an exchange of services. But in this exchange of service, it can be pro bono, but it can also be the object of a sale, and there's also can be an exchange of money. However, the main revenue of a farmer does not result from the sale of seeds, but results from the sale of products. And let's talk about the diversification of the commercial seed offer. Of course, we favor and we promote the development of the OH, so the organic heterogeneous material. We support that. However, we need to absolutely protect this material from GMO. The main interest for us is to be able to adapt strongly to local conditions, not only techniques, but also environmental conditions within each producer is working. Moreover, we need to be able to reuse these seeds in the following years because these seeds become more and more adapted in the context in which they're cultivated. We're also in favor of the marketing of blends, of varieties and of species that were selected for their aptitude to be cultivated on a large scale. Again, this is a great advantage because it guarantees a higher possibility of harvest and also more stability of production. Moreover, we also think, for instance, that the network of seed savers should be excluded by this regulation on marketing. Then what else? Well, we think that we need to guarantee transparency of seed offer. What does that mean? It means, for instance, that we on the label we need to write down all the different techniques that we're using for multiplying the seeds for consumers. If they don't want GMO on their table, or like farmers who don't want GMOs in their fields, they need to be able to be aware of that. So able to say no and to reject that offer. So for that reason, it needs to be clear and transparent. At the same time, we also think that controlling varieties that are marketed cannot be private, should be public. We understand that the farmer is able to do a first selection, so there is self-control within the firm, but then there is the need of public support for so that there is no discrimination between the small producers and large producers, because of course, otherwise the small producers will be completely destroyed and they will disappear from the scene. I'm very afraid that we haven't developed much a topic, maybe because we have a problem of time. I'm talking about property rights, intellectual property rights, and patents and royalties. Farmers must know in the first place if they are really able to sell or not sell freely their products and the seeds. And the world of patents has also made a step into the rural world. Once upon a time, patents were more related to the chemical or engineering industry, but along the years, with time, this has changed. Today, there is a controversy between the European Parliament and the European Office for Patents regarding the consideration of organically selected material, if it's subject to patenting or not. It's a big controversy at the moment. Theoretically, the European legislation said that it's necessary to patent animals and plants that were obtained through by an organic selection process. But practically, the Bureau, the Office for Patents at a European level, accepted the patent of some species that were obtained in this way. This is a great risk, especially if we connect this to new GMOs. Why? Because we don't want the new GMOs to fall under the 2001 directive that says that it is necessary to show the reference process and how much some characters are connected to the new discovery. For instance, I find a plant that is very resistant to a specific pest. So this resistance needs to be connected to the selection process. Otherwise, the risk is that when me, a farmer, I have in my field a plant with the same characteristic, if we continue this process of patenting all living beings, at the end we will probably eventually will not recognize this plant that comes from a traditional selection. We cannot recognize it from a one that was patented and that was actually the result of something that was selected artificially. Other very relevant factors for us are the ones related to the selection of peasant seed systems. I don't know, Fulia, can I have 5 minutes more?
Yeah, I think you can. If the interpreters are okay.
That's
yes?
okay.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
Yes,
Cool.
it's fine.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me explain this. How to define a peasant seed system? Well, in this system, farmers select their own seeds. They therefore obtain heterogeneous populations. They are composed of individuals with similar characteristics, but they have different genetic heritage. So there is a very important evolutionary advantage because they can adapt very well. We think that these evolutionary trends are very good to meet up the changes of the other European level. So more adaptability, more pests, so more resistance to pests, to environmental changes. We think that farmers' research can be complementary to public and private research, but that some characteristic can only be witnessed on our fields. So if we are not an active player in the process, within the selection process, of course, of our own seeds, we cannot even know what's happening and what is being cultivating around us. This is not only related to production or to the countryside, but we recognize in seeds and in the seed system not to separate what is the ability of production and of a seed with the knowledge related to the seeds. I hope that's clear. And this takes place within specific conditions, within a specific activity, within a specific farm. So these systems are crucial for sustainability, for the sustainability of a farmer's life, and in order to maintain the availability of peasant seeds, but it also strictly linked to our own survival, to the survival of the peasants' world. If we consider that, if we see that that most of the farmers have small and medium enterprises. At the different countries, these are organized differently, as we have seen. So we think that production within a farm, the propagation of plants and of seeds needs to have the possibility to adapt to conditions. And this is possible thanks to the multiplication and propagation in subsequent cycles. We think that this allows great resilience of ecosystem, and that in order to do that, it is important to have great diversity within and among different varieties. This was recognized in different fields. And the conclusions we have are that it is essential that all legislation recognize this. Antonio just earlier mentioned the Italian legislation, so the right to replant same seeds. And the same thing, more or less, is recognized by the French legislation. So for us, this is a crucial aspect. It is important to see this right specifically written in different national legislations, because we think that peasants' seeds are the only one that can really guarantee agricultural diversity. And this diversification allows to each country, to each territory, to each land to adapt to different climates, to different conditions. And as peasants and farmers, we recognize that 80% of production is the outcome of seeds coming from our own production. And if we can use this heritage to feed 70% of the world population, they will be able to face the current crisis. And it will not be necessary, as it is commonly said by a corporation, to use GMOs to feed the world population. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alessandra. We are a bit over time, but I saw that there was a question highlighting also, I think, what was just meant and said by Alessandra, that to actually implement the UNDROP, it would be necessary to look at ad hoc laws protecting the rights of indigenous and peasant seed systems rather than looking at exceptions. So I see the very different things. But I would like to thank everyone here as panelists who have taken part in it, and you who have listened to it, and especially those who have interpreted this webinar and allowed us to listen to what the Italian networks are doing. And I would leave the floor to Christophe, maybe to conclude in the name of the Geneva Academy quickly before we say goodbye to you.
Thank you very much, Fulia. Well, it's great to have the perspective from different stakeholders in Italy, that obviously you do different things and you promote different elements of the right to seeds or farmers' rights. And that's, I think, very important, and it will be reflected at the EU level. And I think the same discussions will come out in the EU level and discussion. So it's great, and that was very important for us to do it, to discuss with you. So thank you for having taken the time in this Monday to be with us, and also for those who participated, and again, as Fulia said, also for the interpreters. That was really a fantastic job they have done. So thanks to you very much, and for many of you, see you in Brussels in a few weeks. Thanks, Fulia, also for the organization. Was very good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And yeah, and for the Brussels conference, there's also going to be a virtual link which will be sent to us, but very later on. But you might be so able, if you cannot travel to Brussels, you can still listen to the conference if you want to, and a link will be shared with you if you agree.
Great, thank you.
Thank
bye.
you.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Ciao, grazie.